This episode of Off the Shelf is brought to us by Busy Bee Vegan Skincare. Busy Bee is an all-natural skincare line dedicated to healthy, vegan, plant-based skincare and overall wellness. They offer a selection of handcrafted body scrubs, butters, and washes that not only make your skin glow but smell amazing. Their unique all-natural scents include gingerbread, ruby grapefruit, caramel cake, and morning latte. So why not treat your skin to something fresh and all-natural? Head on over to shopbusybeevegan.com today. And as a special bonus, Busy Bee is offering listeners of this podcast a 15% discount on your first order with the code OrdinaryPodcasts. Thanks for listening and enjoy this week's episode of Off the Shelf. Hello everybody, welcome back to Off the Shelf, the podcast where we take books off of our shelves and into our hearts. My name is Julia, and today we're here to check in together on our read for November, Malinda Lo's Last Night at the Telegraph Club. If you haven't gotten the chance to pick up the book yet, or if you won't be picking it up at all this month, then don't worry. I'll be trying, as usual, to steer clear of major spoilers. I might dabble into a few, but nothing that will ruin the story or make you feel like you know all the important bits. We're only halfway through the month. There's still plenty of time for that. And I'd be pulling my own leg if I was really deluded enough to think that in a few short episodes we could know all there is to know. One of the most interesting parts about studying English for me was realizing how much I didn't pick up on the first read that other people did. Sometimes aspects that even completely change the way we read the story. There's always more to say. Firstly, as always, I'll be starting out with a short expose on Malinda Lo to give us all an idea of where her words and her stories are coming from, and from where she draws inspiration. Next, what I'll be focusing the rest of our discussion on today is the issue and theme in the book of hiding in plain sight. Lily, the main character, is a person very aware of the fact that she has to hide who she is in a lot of different ways merely to survive in her social climate. This impacts not only her growth throughout the book as a character, but the narrative and the story progression as a whole. But before we get too excited about that, let's take it back a step. Malinda Lo is a Chinese-American author and the recipient of numerous writing awards and honors. Though she is maybe best known and most highly acclaimed for her YA fiction, her novels, she also writes short stories that have been included in multi-author anthologies and various nonfiction works, most notably her essays and contributions to LGBT media and journalism, and she also writes a bi-weekly newsletter about writing and culture titled Lo and Behold. Her debut novel, titled Ash, was a finalist for multiple writing awards, and Last Night at the Telegraph Club, one of her most recent releases, won the National Book Award, the Stonewall Book Award, and the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, and the Michael L. Prince and Walter Dean Myers honors. If she hadn't already made a name for herself on the mainstream stage as a bit of a powerhouse, then this book would have been the one to do it. Her website shares that she always wanted to be a writer, but the dream didn't come easily and it didn't come first. She had to work for it, just like the rest of us. She began her education and career studying economics and Chinese culture studies. For her master's degree, focused on East Asian studies at Harvard, and continued further on to study cultural anthropology at Stanford for a second master's degree. I think her education really shows through her writing, and not because the narrative sounds academic or above anyone's head. Something I picked up on already is just how multi-layered her writing is. She's very aware of the presence and impact of politics, economics, and culture clashes on people's everyday lives. It's never just about us. Our lives are made up of everything that's happened and everything that is happening, whether we want it to or recognize it or not. History and society shape the way that we live our lives, make possible or impossible a lot of different paths and potentials and opportunities. Lo's expertise and interest in culture and media might have made her into a bit of an authority on the issue of diversity, though not necessarily by her own choice. On the frequently asked questions page on her website, she shares her opinion on the necessity of promoting diversity in the stories we tell, but maybe even more importantly, she emphasizes placing a priority on those stories also being accurate and truthful to the cultures they present. It's a pretty basic thing, but it's not as common as we want it to be. One of the questions posed to her, for example, asks whether it's ethical or okay for white people to write the stories of non-white characters. In response, she refuses to be the single voice on this issue because, as she states, the stakes that she holds in any given area someone might choose to write about are different from the next person's, and from the next person's after that. what she might read as an offensive or inaccurate representation of her own culture may slide by someone else's notice. Likewise, what is harmful to someone else might not raise her own red flags. Basically, though, what she says is this: writing is a hard job. In writing any story, even a completely fictional one, hours of research go into making it consistent and coherent and accurate. If any writer, regardless of their race, decides to take on the challenge of writing about a culture apart from their own, then they sure as hell better be ready to accept the responsibility of what representing that culture actually entails. They need to understand the high stakes that others may have in the stories they tell, because these aren't just stories, they are people's lives. And if nothing else, people deserve the dignity of having their stories respected and truthfully put out into the world. Those writing these stories need to be honest about why they want to be the teller in the first place, and they must be open and willing to accept criticism and correction on their telling, because in the end, their careers aren't the thing that matter more, hanging in the balance. It's the people's actual lives that they're dealing with that do. Lowe states more than once that there are few things more alienating and jarring for her in receiving media of any form than cross-cultural errors and careless inaccuracies. Even authors who write their own culture and heritage, as Lowe has done in Last Night at the Telegraph Club, run the risk of making mistakes if they fail to do their research and take care in their representation. Even as an academic of Chinese culture, Lowe understands the limit of her own knowledge. She knows that to be a writer, and especially one who wants to write diversely, is to never stop learning. And that's maybe one of the most important lessons that any writer can learn and internalize. We don't get anywhere, and we might even cut ourselves off from others by assuming that we know all there is to know on any given topic. The first step to becoming more knowledgeable is to become aware of and accept what we don't know. That's as good of a place to start as any. To get us started on the novel, something about it that is really interesting to me so far is the way that it illustrates the issue of invisibility, and the way that for the main character Lily, invisibility is both something self-imposed and forced upon her, something both protective and imprisoning. The term intersectionality also comes to mind, even though it's a more modern term than when the events of our novel take place. The reality of it is nothing new, though, as Lily's experience portrays. It's not any one piece of Lily's identity that forces her into hiding and makes her feel invisible, but the way that the different pieces of who she is overlap and intersect, and, from the points of view of those around her, come into conflict. That is, Lily is not just female, or just interested in a male-dominated career field, or just Chinese American, or just a lesbian. She is all of these things, and even though any of those pieces of her alone might be considered acceptable in certain circles, when all taken together, she faces a whole lot of adversity from every direction. In order for her to pass in any of those individual spaces, she has to hide the other parts of herself, those that seemingly make her a target or unacceptable in those places. All of these things, those pieces of her identity, as well as the flack she faces, give shape and dimension to her growth as a teenager into an adult. She struggles with certainty in who she is because, essentially, who she feels she is not acceptable in the eyes of her society. And so who she's allowed to be is just not the whole picture. She lives in an in-between, but in truth, for her it's not really living at all. She begins to find pride and assurance in herself when she refuses to hide anymore, when she realizes just how impossible it is to really hide, when she understands that no matter how hard she tries to make herself or certain pieces of herself invisible, they will find a way to peek through. Some seem to her more easily concealed than others, but in truth, none of them really are. The harder she tries to keep them hidden and herself protected, the more obvious it becomes that she can't really hide anything if she wants to have a say in the person, the adult she's growing into. Evidently, invisibility is also something that's enforced on Lily, intentionally or not, by those who would rather one piece of her identity make up the whole. They agree to that one piece of her, but refuse to see the rest, meaning that she has the choice to face exclusion outright, or to accept and share their vision of who they would prefer her to be. There are sometimes these moments where we start to see her identity blossom, when she momentarily forgets the necessity she holds to herself to hide, and recognizes a place where she truly feels that she belongs, or at least one that she feels she could grow to belong. The first example of this that really stands out to me is the trip to the clothing store that Lily takes with her mother. None of the outfits that are chosen for her do anything for her, but she sees one piece that catches her eye, a tuxedo jerkin, which from what I can tell is sort of similar to a modern waistcoat, traditionally worn only by men, but popularized in women's fashion to be worn over blouses in the 1950s in the post-war period, after the events of women's wartime work efforts. Lily recognizes the promise that such a piece offers to women, the promise of social and economic and political engagement and importance, and she briefly entertains the idea of trying it on, indulging in the thought of the person she could become even just by wearing it. Her fantasies are quickly interrupted, though, by her mother's interjection. She questions what Lily wants with such a piece, where in the world she could see herself wearing it, and Lily pens herself back in, accepting her mom's words as the truth. She accepts the way that her mother renders this undeniable piece of herself invisible. She grows embarrassed and self-conscious of the fact that she let it show through it all, as if she were a lot younger than she actually is, and got caught doing something that she's not supposed to, like getting into her mom's makeup and making a mess. She repeats her mother's words to herself. Where would she wear such a thing? And she reconsiders the appeal of becoming someone else. Someone who, as she says, would cause a stir, a sensation at the fall dance. She concludes, quote, "She wasn't the kind of girl who caused sensations," unquote. She eliminates from her mind not only the possibility of becoming that girl, but the likelihood of her ever becoming that girl. And even at such an early stage in the book, it's a really hard thing to see, a young girl who is scared to grow, for the fear that who she is, who she'll grow into, will be rejected. In this example, we can see that the invisibility enforced on Lily is not a comfortable one, no matter how used to it she's grown over the years to be. It's a harsh reminder that in order for her to fit in and to blend in any of the situations she comes into, she can only show and display one aspect of who she is and not the whole picture. Even with her family, the people who are supposed to know her truth the best and love her unconditionally for it, she is forced into silence to hide the pieces of her that don't fit into their idea of who she should be. The chapter concludes with Lily staring at herself in the mirror, in these clothes that speak nothing to who she really is, who she wants to be, who she wants nothing more than to have the chance to let herself become. We see the impossibility of her growth under such restraints, and see too all of her wants just below the surface of the face she puts on. Luckily, there is hope to be found for Lily, and it comes in large part with her introduction to a community, the realization that there are others in the world like her, who feel the way she feels, who care to legitimize who she is through their own pride. Her first introduction to this idea of a community also comes on early in the book, when she drops the article clipping about Tommy Andrews, a stage male impersonator, to use the term from the book, under the school bathroom stall, and Kath sees it. Lily immediately tries to excuse her keeping the article, because although she's finally begun to piece together this aspect of her identity for herself, it isn't something for which she's gotten over the potential shame of having it on display. The thought that she's failed to hide it from someone who might react badly, and open herself up to the humiliation for it, is something that terrifies her. She's well acquainted with the tensions created between what is considered normal and anything or anyone considered different, and she knows what consequences wait for the latter. But Kath doesn't reprimand her or shame her for the exposure. She doesn't call Lily out on lying about why she has the article either. She offers her what nobody else has done for Lily so far. She offers her the possibility of a community, of people like herself, in a place where Lily has so often felt alone. Maybe most importantly of all, she does this without the suggestion that for one piece of Lily's identity to be okay and be acceptable, the others have to be false. Not just anyone, not her family, not her community in Chinatown, not the boys in her math class, not even the other women she meets later in the book at the Telegraph Club offers her that same acceptance. She realizes in this moment, so early on, the comfort that she finds in this, and she realizes too that it is nothing like the relative comfort she thought she'd found for so long in making herself invisible, in hiding who she is. Once she sees this, she realizes that there's no real going back. Her understanding that hiding what is in plain sight is impossible. And it really sets in stone for her how vital it is that she stop hiding. And that is the place where her pride begins to grow. It's still a long process for her, but it is an essential one to her growth as she enters this new stage of her life, a stage where she has two choices, really: to remain in the suffocating protection of invisibility and silence, or to have pride in the process of self-discovery and self-awareness. So far, one of my major takeaways from this book, something it's speaking quite clearly and definitely to me, is the belief that we can't live our lives, truly live them, by someone else's prescription. To really become who we need to be the most true and honest versions of ourselves, we have to mark out our own paths. That might be a simple lesson to understand, but it's one of the hardest ones maybe to actually pursue and to fulfill. To some extent, because I think one of the biggest fatal flaws that plague a lot of people, myself included, is the want to please, the need to be liked. But living our own truths doesn't always have to mean putting others out, or going against others' ideas of who we are 100%, because for the most part, I think we try to surround ourselves in people who know us better than that, and who care to find out who we are to ourselves. As we grow into adult independence, ideally, we learn to stop accepting those confines. It's a lot harder to do, of course, in Lily's case, in her current dependency on her parents, but I think that throughout the book, we're seeing her grow into it a lot more, and it's a really beautiful development to watch play out. So, I hope that this talk didn't go into too many specifics for you. I hope that something in it spoke to you. If you haven't gotten the chance yet to pick up Last Night at the Telegraph Club, then I hope that I've at least piqued your interest in it and put it on your radar. It's been quite enjoyable for me so far, and I can't wait to dish into it deeper with you next time we come together for my final review at the end of the month. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and until next time, take good care and happy reading. The Off the Shelf podcast is a proud member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. To learn more about this podcast or the network, please visit ordinarypodcast.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, please subscribe or leave us a comment. Thank you so much, and take care.